a small collection of 13 colonies clinging to the eastern edge of a vast continent, fighting for independence from the world's greatest empire. Fast forward just 150 years, and that same nation stands as the undisputed global superpower, with military bases in over 70 countries and economic influence reaching every corner of the earth. How did the United States transform from colonial underdog to global hegemon? Was it destiny, strategy, or pure circumstance? Today, we're diving deep into the entire history of what many call the American Empire, from its humble colonial beginnings to its current status as the world's dominant force. But here's the twist. This isn't just a story about military conquest or economic dominance. It's a tale of evolution, adaptation, and the constant tension between ideals and reality. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's explore how America built an empire unlike any the world has ever seen. Let's start at the beginning, but not where you might think. The story of American power doesn't begin with the Declaration of Independence. It starts with geography. Think of North America as nature's gift to empire building. Two massive oceans providing natural defense, a continent rich in resources, and vast territories ripe for expansion. But geography alone doesn't create empires. It takes vision, opportunity, and often a healthy dose of conflict. The 13 colonies that would become the United States were already displaying imperial characteristics before independence. Take Virginia, for example. By the 1760s, land speculators, including a young George Washington, were eyeing territories far beyond the Appalachian Mountains. The British Proclamation of 1763, which prohibited westward expansion, wasn't just about preventing conflict with Native Americans. It was about controlling American ambitions that were already continental in scope. Here's where it gets interesting. The American Revolution wasn't just about tea taxes or representation. It was about the right to expand, to pursue what would later be called manifest destiny. The colonists weren't fighting to become a small, isolated nation. They were fighting for the right to become something much bigger. When the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, Britain didn't just recognize American independence. They handed over territory stretching to the Mississippi River. Suddenly, this new nation had doubled in size overnight. It was like winning the lottery and inheriting a fortune simultaneously. But here's the crucial part. From day one, American leaders understood that their survival depended on growth. In a world dominated by European empires, staying small meant staying vulnerable. Thomas Jefferson put it perfectly when he called America an empire of liberty, a phrase that would define American expansion for centuries. The early republic faced a fundamental question. How do you build an empire while claiming to champion liberty and self-determination? This contradiction would shape every major decision in American history. If the early republic was a startup, then the 19th century was its explosive growth phase. And like many successful expansions, it wasn't always pretty. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 was America's first major imperial acquisition, and it was almost accidental. Napoleon needed cash for his European wars, and Jefferson needed to secure New Orleans for American trade. For $15 million, about $400 million in today's money, America doubled in size again. It was the real estate deal of the millennium. But here's what's fascinating. Jefferson, the champion of limited government, had no constitutional authority to make this purchase, yet he did it anyway, because he understood that empires don't grow by following rule books, they grow by seizing opportunities. The War of 1812 might seem like a sideshow, but it was actually America's second war of independence. Britain still didn't take the United States seriously as a power. The burning of Washington, D.C. was meant to put America back in its place. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. Andrew Jackson's victory at New Orleans created a new American narrative. We weren't just survivors, we were conquerors. Then came what historians call the Great Game of westward expansion. The Texas Revolution, the Mexican-American War, the Oregon Territory negotiations, each seemed like separate events, but they were all part of a coordinated campaign to reach the Pacific Ocean. The Mexican-American War deserves special attention because it revealed something crucial about American empire building. Unlike European empires that relied on direct colonial rule, America perfected something different, the art of the fait accompli. Create a situation, provoke a response, then claim self-defense while taking what you wanted all along. James K. Polk ran for president promising to expand to the Pacific, and he delivered. Through war, negotiation, and strategic provocation, America gained California, Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona and New Mexico, and parts of several other states. It was an area larger than Mexico itself, acquired in just 4 years. But here's what's really genius. American expansion wasn't just territorial, it was demographic. The California Gold Rush brought hundreds of thousands of Americans west almost overnight. The Homestead Act essentially gave away land to encourage settlement. America wasn't just claiming territory, it was filling it with Americans who would defend those claims. Think of it like this. European empires were like rental properties, lots of holdings, but always at risk of tenant revolt. America was building something different, not an empire of subjects, but an empire of citizens. It was revolutionary, and it worked. By 1850, America stretched from sea to shining sea. In less than 70 years, it had grown from a coastal strip to a continental power. But continental wasn't enough. The next phase would take America beyond its borders entirely. The late 19th century marked America's transformation from a continental power to a global empire. But this shift didn't happen overnight. It was the result of profound changes in technology, economics, and American self-perception. The Civil War was more than a conflict over slavery. It was America's imperial rehearsal. The Union didn't just defeat the Confederacy, it demonstrated unprecedented organizational capability. The ability to field, supply, and coordinate armies across vast distances, the industrial capacity to outfit millions of soldiers, the financial systems to fund years of warfare. These weren't just military achievements, they were proof of imperial readiness. After the war, America faced a new problem: success. The continental frontier was closing, industrial capacity was exploding, and agricultural surplus was growing. Where European nations might have been content with domestic prosperity, American leaders saw stagnation as death. The economy needed new markets, the military needed new challenges, and the people needed new frontiers. Enter the Spanish-American War of 1898, America's coming out party as a global power. On paper, it was about Cuban independence and Spanish oppression. In reality, it was about something much bigger: America's announcement that it was ready to play in the big leagues. The war itself was almost comically one-sided. The Spanish fleet was destroyed in a matter of hours. American forces, despite their inexperience in tropical warfare, overwhelmed Spanish defenders across multiple theaters. But the real victory wasn't military, it was psychological. America had proven it could project power across oceans. The Treaty of Paris that ended the war was a masterpiece of imperial acquisition disguised as humanitarian intervention. Cuba became independent, but under American oversight. Puerto Rico became an American territory. The Philippines were purchased for $20 million, giving America its first major overseas colony. And almost as an afterthought, America annexed Hawaii, giving it a strategic base in the middle of the Pacific. But here's what made the American approach unique. Unlike European empires that ruled through governors and colonial administrators, America began developing what scholars now call informal empire. Economic influence, military bases, diplomatic pressure. Why occupy territory when you could control it more subtly? The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine in 1904 made this explicit. America claimed the right to intervene anywhere in the Western Hemisphere to maintain stability. It wasn't conquest in the traditional sense. It was sphere of influence politics on a continental scale. Theodore Roosevelt's Great White Fleet World Tour was pure theater, but brilliant theater. 16 battleships sailing around the globe, visiting every major port, demonstrating American naval power to anyone who cared to watch. The message was clear. America was no longer a regional power. It was a force to be reckoned with globally. By 1914, America had transformed from a continental republic to a global empire. It controlled territories from the Caribbean to the Pacific, had established economic dominance throughout the Western Hemisphere, and possessed a navy that could challenge any power on Earth. The stage was set for America's emergence as the world's dominant force. World War I was America's imperial graduation ceremony, but it almost didn't happen. President Wilson spent years trying to keep America neutral, not because he was a pacifist, but because he understood something profound. The longer America stayed out, the stronger its eventual position would be. Think of it like a poker game where all the other players are going all in while you're sitting back, watching them exhaust their resources. By 1917, the traditional European powers had been bleeding money, men, and materials for 3 years. America entered the war fresh, wealthy, and with industrial capacity that dwarfed the exhausted European economies. The American Expeditionary Force's impact went far beyond its military contribution. For the first time, American soldiers were fighting on European soil, not as auxiliaries or mercenaries, but as representatives of a power that was now Europe's equal. The war didn't just make the world safe for democracy, it made America indispensable to global stability. But Wilson's real masterstroke came at the peace conference. While European leaders focused on punishing Germany and redistributing colonial territories, Wilson was playing a different game entirely. His 14 points weren't just about ending the war, they were about creating a new world order with America at its center. The League of Nations was Wilson's attempt to institutionalize American leadership. Even though the U.S. Senate rejected membership, the precedent was set. Global problems required American solutions. It was a lesson America would remember when the next crisis arrived. The interwar period saw America retreat from formal international leadership, but not from empire building. Instead, it perfected economic imperialism. Hollywood movies, Ford automobiles, Coca-Cola, jazz music. American culture became global culture. Economic influence where military occupation might have been required in previous eras. Then came World War II, and with it, America's transformation from great power to superpower. But this wasn't just about military victory, it was about strategic positioning for the post-war world. Roosevelt understood something that Wilson had missed. If America was going to lead the world, it needed to make other countries want to follow. The Lend-Lease program wasn't just about helping allies, it was about creating dependencies. Countries that relied on American weapons, supplies, and economic support would naturally align with American interests after the war. The Manhattan Project represented something unprecedented in human history, the development of weapons so powerful that they fundamentally changed the nature of international relations. When the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they didn't just end World War II,
They announced the beginning of the American century. By 1945, America stood alone. Its homeland was untouched by war, its industrial capacity was greater than the rest of the world combined, and it possessed exclusive control over the ultimate weapon. The British Empire was bankrupt, the French Empire was shattered, Germany and Japan were occupied territories, and the Soviet Union, despite its military prowess, was economically devastated. The Bretton Woods Conference had already established the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The United Nations was being built around American leadership. NATO would soon formalize American military dominance in the West. America hadn't just won the war, it had positioned itself to define the peace. But empires aren't built on single victories, they're maintained through constant adaptation. And America's greatest challenge was just beginning: the Cold War.
The Cold War wasn't just a conflict between America and the Soviet Union. It was America's masterclass in imperial management. For nearly half a century, America demonstrated how to maintain global dominance, not through direct conquest, but through alliance systems, economic integration, and the strategic use of proxy conflicts. The Truman Doctrine of 1947 was America's declaration of global responsibility. It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation, Truman declared. It was a blank check for intervention anywhere in the world, and America cashed it repeatedly. But the real genius of Cold War strategy was the Marshall Plan. Instead of occupying Western Europe, America rebuilt it with American dollars, American companies, and American standards. It was empire through reconstruction, and it worked brilliantly. European nations didn't just recover, they became integrated into an American-led economic system that made traditional conquest unnecessary. NATO formalized this arrangement militarily. For the first time in history, America had permanent military alliances during peacetime, with American commanders leading foreign troops on foreign soil. It was occupation disguised as protection, and it was so successful that former enemies begged to join. The Korean War tested America's new imperial system under fire. Here was a conflict thousands of miles from American shores, with no direct threat to American territory. Yet America committed hundreds of thousands of troops because it understood something crucial. Imperial powers don't get to choose their battles. Their credibility depends on fighting the battles that test their resolve. The nuclear arms race added a new dimension to American power. Massive retaliation wasn't just a military doctrine, it was imperial psychology. The ability to destroy any rival completely meant that America could extend security guarantees across the globe. It was like having an insurance policy that covered the entire free world, with America as the sole underwriter. But America's Cold War empire wasn't just military, it was cultural and economic. The Voice of America broadcast American values to the world. American universities educated foreign elites who returned home with American perspectives. American corporations didn't just sell products, they sold the American way of life. The space program was perhaps the most visible symbol of American imperial ambition. Landing on the moon wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a demonstration of American technological superiority that could be seen by every human being on Earth. It was soft power projection on a cosmic scale. Vietnam was America's imperial reality check. Here was a conflict that seemed to fit the Cold War playbook, containing communist expansion, supporting allied governments, demonstrating resolve. But Vietnam revealed the limits of imperial power. Some battles can't be won through superior technology or economic resources. Sometimes local determination trumps global power. Yet even Vietnam didn't fundamentally weaken American hegemony.
By the 1970s, America had learned to manage empire more subtly. Nixon's opening to China wasn't just diplomatic breakthrough, it was strategic triangulation, using great power rivalry to strengthen American influence with both sides. The 1980s saw America's imperial renaissance under Reagan. Military spending that pushed the Soviet Union beyond its economic limits, support for anti-communist movements worldwide, and a reassertion of American confidence that culminated in the Soviet collapse. America hadn't just won the Cold War, it had exhausted its only rival. By 1991, America stood as the world's sole superpower. The Soviet Union was gone, China was still developing, Europe was economically powerful but politically fragmented, and Japan was wealthy but strategically constrained. For the first time since the Roman Empire, a single power dominated the globe without serious challenger. It was the imperial moment America had been building toward for 2 centuries. The question was, what would it do with unrivaled power?
The end of the Cold War presented America with a problem no empire in history had ever faced. What do you do when you've won everything? The 1990s represented America's unipolar moment, a decade when American power was so overwhelming that the traditional rules of international relations seemed to have been suspended. The Gulf War of 1991 was America's victory lap, a demonstration of military capability so overwhelming that it redefined warfare itself. Precision-guided weapons, real-time battlefield communication, and the ability to destroy enemy forces while suffering minimal casualties, it was technology-enabled imperialism at its finest. But the real story of the 1990s wasn't military conquest, it was economic integration. The World Trade Organization, NAFTA, the expansion of NATO, and the European Union all represented the institutionalization of American-led globalization. Countries weren't just trading with America, they were adopting American economic models, legal frameworks, and business practices. The Internet, initially a Pentagon project, became America's most powerful tool of cultural empire. American companies dominated digital infrastructure, American platforms shaped global communication, and American values became embedded in the technologies that connected the world. It was soft power on steroids. Yet this period also revealed a fundamental tension in American empire. The American people, having won the Cold War, expected a peace dividend, lower military spending, less foreign involvement, focus on domestic issues. But empires don't get to retire. The responsibilities of global leadership continue whether the imperial population wants them or not. September 11, 2001 shattered America's post-Cold War complacency and launched what many consider the final phase of American imperial expansion. The War on Terror represented something unprecedented, a global conflict against a tactic rather than a state, with no clear endpoint and unlimited geographic scope. The invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq were classic imperial interventions dressed in humanitarian and security language, but they also revealed the limitations of military power in the 21st century. America could topple governments in weeks, but building stable successor states proved far more challenging than anyone anticipated. These conflicts also highlighted the economic costs of modern empire. Unlike previous imperial powers that profited from conquest, America's interventions became financial drains. The total cost of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars exceeded $2 trillion, resources that might have been used to maintain America's technological and economic advantages. Today, America's empire looks different from anything in history. It's not built on colonies or occupied territories, but on a complex web of alliances, economic relationships, cultural influence, and military presence that spans the globe. America maintains over 800 military installations in more than 70 countries, more than all other nations combined. The U.S. Navy patrols every ocean, enforcing freedom of navigation and maintaining global trade routes. The dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency, giving America enormous economic leverage. American universities educate global elites, American technology companies dominate digital infrastructure, and American entertainment shapes global culture. Yet this empire faces challenges unlike any in its history. China's rise represents the first serious competitor to American hegemony since the Soviet Union. Unlike the USSR, China is integrated into the global economic system America created, making confrontation far more complex. Russia, though economically weaker, has proven willing to challenge American interests directly, from Ukraine to cyberspace to election interference. More fundamentally, the nature of power itself is changing. Military superiority matters less when conflicts are fought through cyber attacks, economic warfare, and information manipulation. Cultural influence competes with economic necessity as developing nations seek Chinese investment while consuming American entertainment. Perhaps most challenging, the American people themselves are questioning empire. After 2 decades of costly overseas interventions, with domestic infrastructure crumbling and inequality rising, many Americans are asking why their country should continue bearing the costs of global leadership. Yet, history suggests that empires don't choose to retreat. They're forced to by circumstances beyond their control. America's global position, built over more than 2 centuries, has created dependencies and expectations that make simple withdrawal nearly impossible. Allied nations rely on American security guarantees. Global trade depends on American naval protection, and the international system itself is built around American institutions and leadership. The future of the American empire will likely depend on its ability to adapt once again, as it has so many times before. Can it maintain global influence while addressing domestic challenges? Can it compete with China without triggering a new Cold War? Can it preserve democracy and human rights while working with authoritarian allies?
The story of the American Empire is the story of transformation from colonial rebellion to continental republic to global hegemon. It's a tale of geographic advantages seized, opportunities exploited, and challenges overcome through adaptation rather than tradition. What makes the American Empire unique isn't its military power or economic influence. Other empires have possessed those. What makes it unique is its ability to reinvent itself repeatedly, to turn defeats into victories, and to make its dominance seem like global benefit rather than imperial exploitation. Whether America can continue this transformation remains the great question of our time. The challenges are unprecedented. Rising competitors, changing technology, domestic divisions, and global problems that require cooperation rather than domination. But if history teaches us anything, it's that empires are defined not by their origins or their peaks, but by how they adapt to change. The American Empire has reinvented itself many times before, from continental expansion to overseas territories, to global hegemony, to soft power dominance. The next chapter of this story is being written now,
in the decisions made in Washington and Beijing, in the technologies being developed in Silicon Valley and Shenzhen, in the choices being made by peoples and nations around the world. One thing is certain, the age of American empire isn't just a historical phenomenon. It's the world we live in today. Understanding its origins, evolution, and current challenges isn't just academic curiosity, it's essential knowledge for navigating the 21st century. The American empire began with 13 colonies dreaming of something bigger. Where it goes from here depends on whether Americans and the world still share those imperial dreams, or whether new dreams will take their place. Thanks for joining me on this journey through centuries of American power. What do you think? Is the American empire entering its final phase? Or is it preparing for another transformation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world.
Thanks for watching. If you love this document presentation, please subscribe for more history document update. Good luck!